You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. We are live in afternoon drive time, and I'm really delighted to welcome our next guest. Let me just say this. Joining us now is Dr. Wes Bellamy. He's the executive director of the John Mercer Langston Institute for African American Political Leadership. He's also an associate professor of political science and public administration at the Virginia State University. Dr. Bellamy and his team, they just dropped this first ever annual research brief specifically disaggregating the economic conditions of Black men and boys, not folded into a broader Black America average, but isolated, measured, and sourced. Dr. Bellamy, welcome back to A More Perfect Union.
My brother, thanks for having me, Doc. We appreciate the work in which you do, and thank you for lending your voice to this not only study, but our people and our culture as a whole.
Absolutely. Wouldn't have it any other way. Well, let's talk about this brief, which was released July 30th at the Black Print Leadership Institute at the Jefferson School, African American Heritage Center in Charlottesville. It's the first in an annual series from the Langston Institute in conjunction with the Virginia Alliance for Black Men and Boys. The animating idea, as I understand it, is that aggregate numbers hide the specific deterioration happening to Black men. The brief, it pairs 26 sources of federal data points with a year of qualitative field engagement, over 10,000 touch points at barbershops, basketball courts, in conferences across the country. And it explicitly frames itself as a companion to, not in competition with, the Joint Center's March 2026 brief on the economic state of Black women. And so, Dr. Bellamy, your report, it opens with a line that's going to stick with people. It reads, "Nobody is coming to save us." Walk us through why the Institute felt this specific disaggregation of Black men and boys was necessary right now.
Well, again, I think you hit it on the head. First and foremost, we know that nobody's coming to save us. And throughout our conversations, again, nearly a year or so, we've heard Black men say repeatedly that they felt as if they were isolated. They felt as if they've been left alone. They felt as if people don't really care about them in the same way in which we see other demographics. And that's not just Black women, that's just other individuals as a whole. And what we wanted to be intentional about was informing communities and persons as a whole that this study isn't necessarily a situation in which we're trying to pit Black men against Black women. That's not what we're trying to do at all. But as you alluded to, aggregating or disaggregating the data is of the utmost importance. You can't just lump Black men in with Black folk collectively and say, okay, well, yeah, they all messed up. No. We need to have specific measurable items that are put in place for us to be able to see how our progress is going. And unfortunately, this report showed that in many ways we're either at a standstill collectively, or for far too many of us, we're reverting and taking a couple of steps back. But we believe that, again, it's important for us to know the information and have the data. And then after developing the data and after looking at the data, we can develop a strategy in order for us to move forward. So we're really proud of our work. It's bleak, but it doesn't mean that we're hopeless. Our people are resilient, and we will continue to move forward.
And, in this conversation, we're going to put on our asset lenses as well, and we're going to lift up examples of where the work that is necessary is happening and who those leaders are on the front lines that we should be reaching out to support and tapping in with. But I want to go back to something that you said earlier, because I think, so often we see headlines where Black men are pitted against Black women.
Yeah.
And this point is worth lifting up. You were pretty explicit in the brief that this isn't a competition with Black women who carry their own documented burdens and wealth and retirement security. Talk to us about why was it important to make that distinction so clearly and right up front?
Yeah, I mean, I love Black women. I ain't gonna hide it. I got 4 Black daughters. I'm, you know what I'm saying? We're not here to, again, put us in a situation in which we are in competition with our sisters. My job and my duty is to protect our sisters, to ensure that our sisters and my daughters, specifically my nieces, my biological sisters, my cousins, my mama, my job is to make sure they're protected and they're well taken care of. However, that doesn't mean that I have to negate my brothers. And the data is showing, when you look at, collectively, only 17% of African Americans as a whole are reading proficiently at the fourth grade level. But then when you get to unemployment numbers in adulthood, nearly 650,000 Black men who are unemployed from quarter one of 2025 to quarter one of 2026. When you look at Black males only representing 26% of the enrollment share at HBCUs, only 28% of the enrollment share at PWIs, we are in a severe state of emergency. It's an economic crisis. Black men only making 77 cents on the dollar in comparison to every dollar that white males make. So again, like we don't have time to be in competition with each other. What we have to do immediately, or as my grandma and my folks would say, immediately, is figure out what we do and have some solutions. And that's what we're about.
That's right, having solutions. But I mean, still, it's quite a sting. I mean, there's a lot in this report that makes you want to holler and lift up both your hands, to say it the way Marvin said it. If a father who's listening right now, or a young brother himself, hears 22.7 million Black men and boys in this country, and 77 cents on the dollar, what's the first thing you want folks to sit with, and what do you want people to do with information like that?
I think two things. I think I want you to go through the entire gamut of emotion. I want you to be upset. I want you to be disappointed. I want you to feel like, yeah, in some ways we already knew this, and this is exactly what we've already talked about. And now we have the data to put it in a quantifiable number for us to look at. But then I want you to feel inspired that you're going to be the change agent. This isn't a moment in time in which we can take a woe is me approach. This isn't a moment in time in which we can think that, yeah, the world is against us. These systems are working exactly as they're supposed to, but that doesn't mean that we can't come out of this, because we've shown that we always do. There are examples and priorities within the report that shows and points to ways in which we can have success. And I believe in you, Black brother. I believe in you, Black dad. I believe in you, Black son. You will figure this out. And collectively, we're going to be better off next year than we were today.
I want to point out that this is the first in an annual series. You're essentially putting a stake in the ground and inviting people to hold you and these institutions accountable year over year. When we come forward, Dr. Bellamy, I want to better understand what does accountability actually look like if the numbers don't improve next year. You are listening to and streaming a More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. More when we come forward with Dr. Wes Bellamy. He is the executive producer. I'm sorry, I just gave you promotion. He's the executive director of the John Mercer Langston Institute for African American Political Leadership. He's also an associate professor at Virginia State University, and he's sticking around. More with him when we come forward, only on KBLA Talk 1580. You are listening to and streaming a More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Corte, and really delighted to be in conversation with my brother, Dr. Wes Bellamy. He is the executive director, not the executive producer, the executive director of the John Mercer. He could be an executive producer. He's multi-talented.
I got an Emmy. I got an Emmy. So
oh, there you have it. Okay, there we have it. He is executive director of the John Mercer Langston Institute for African American Political Leadership. He's also associate professor of political science and public administration at Virginia State University. And we're talking about this new report that the streets are buzzing about. Lots of folks out there who are doing work that is of consequence, particularly Black men and boys, are paying extra close attention to this new report that was just released. And before the break, Dr. Bellamy, I was asking you, basically, what happens in the name of accountability if some of the numbers that you highlight in this report don't improve next year, especially given the state of our politics, the state, the grip that a certain party has on Congress and then on the White House and in many state houses across the country?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things. First and foremost, these upcoming midterm elections are going to be of the utmost importance. And here's a couple of reasons why. The current administration has stated emphatically over and over again, and they've not been honest or truthful when they state things like they've provided the most resources and funding to HBCUs than any other administration in this year or that year. The fact of the matter remains is that many of our HBCUs are severely underfunded, and grossly underfunded, if I'm being candid. So when we look at accountability, when we speak about accountability, it starts at the absolute top. I think there's an obligation for the administration, the current administration, to properly fund HBCUs holistically. That's both public and private institutions, the same way in which many other institutions who are PWIs, who are both public and private, receive federal funds. We want to ensure that that's happening across the board with our institutions. I think, secondly, when you look at stand-up programs like the one in which President Obama created My Brother's Keeper, very strategic and intentional programs to address the problems about Black men and boys, minority Black men and boys as a whole, but right now we're talking about Black men and boys. Those programs need more funding and resources. Again, that's from the top. That comes from not only Congress, but the president directly. On a statewide level, all public HBCUs, they need to be funded. And then administrators at these HBCUs need to develop programs that are focused on retention and development of Black men and boys, not only in college, but then we need school districts across the country to look at very tangible ways and strategic ways to increase the economic and educational outcomes for Black men and boys in the K-12 school setting. That means reading interventions. That means different pathways to be able to have career readiness and workforce development. That means ensuring that there are proper supports and not just sending kids to special education programs. There's a wide variety of different things in which we can look at priority levels. And then one of the things that we also discussed during the report was starting the on-ramp early. So these young folk, like I'm talking about Black boys from the time they come out the womb to 4 or 5 years old, to 4th grade, to 5th grade, to 6th grade, 7th grade, etc. We have to look at very intentional ways of ensuring, one, that they are reading efficiently, that they are able to do, as my grandma would say, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But we have to, in all seriousness, have very tangible ways to ensure that our young men are reaching the educational prowess and not just video games, not just looking at becoming YouTubers, which, hey, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. But there are more ways for us to be able to get out of this funk, if you will, in which we are in, that the data is representing, with us having, again, tangible solutions to be able to access not only wealth, because the data reports that a Black boy being raised in a family that has a great level of wealth will not prohibit them from having to deal with the issues of the systems in place. But we do want to provide them with the best possible outcomes that they can get. And then us as adults, we fight these systems as you and I are doing every day on the front lines.
Yeah. And
So
I'm
sorry, but
no, I mean, it was a rich answer to a very complex question. We know that Black men now make up 26% of HBCU enrollment.
Yep.
And that's down from 38% in 1976.
Yep.
And I just want to connect the dots for our leaders, learners, and listeners who may not be as familiar, that there's a substantial number of Black lawyers, Black doctors, Black dentists, Black engineers that come out of our HBCUs, right? And so, think about, the local dentist or, the family doctor, in your community. Chances are so many of them got some part of their education at an HBCU. And so, it's true that HBCUs really represent a substantial economic engine for our community. And, if we're not investing those unrestricted dollars, those precious unrestricted dollars into our HBCUs, then, we might be able to sort of maintain status quo, but we're not going to really be able to seize upon the opportunities for innovation in this moment when we're seeing, the AI economy growing like gangbusters.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and you touched on a caveat that I think is really important when we talk about HBCU funding specifically. A lot of folks say, "Well, Mackenzie Scott gave these schools all that money. What are they doing?" Or they, I saw that this school got X amount of dollars in a grant. What are they doing with the money? And you touched on it. Like a lot of those dollars are restricted. Those aren't funds that individuals can use for education or support. They can't be used for scholarship. They are oftentimes resources for capital plans, building renovations, things of that nature. So we got to understand where the money is going and what it's being used for, and how in many instances HBCUs have their hands tied when they receive certain dollars. Now, we also have to be realistic about the fact that if every Black boy wanted to go to a HBCU, all of our HBCUs don't have the capacity to hold them. So these PWIs also have a responsibility that just as they recruit our young men to come play football and basketball, to put butts in seats, they have an obligation to ensure that our young men are graduating, and not just the student athletes. So again, like very, very strategic and targeted measures have to be made for our young men and boys, and not just those going to college. I saw in one of the posts somebody who was talking about what we were doing. I think it was Black with No Chaser. And there were a great deal of comments of people saying, well, hey, just go to trade school, but not understanding the barriers that could potentially go to a young man entering a trade as well. One, when you enter into an apprenticeship program, if you will, you're usually not paid at the same rate as everyone else, which means you got to sustain yourself while you're in the training program. There also doesn't always become an immediate job as soon as you finish the trade program. Like most times there's a lag. So how does a young man sustain himself after he finishes and completes the training program, whether that be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? Where's the resources and assistance there? How is the resources and assistance to be able to purchase your tools? And not everyone can be an entrepreneur. You also need a little bit of background. You need a little bit of assistance there. So again, even after you get the job, even if you choose to take a trade and you're working and moving yourself up the ladder, our data also showed that there were systemic barriers in terms of those who hire the persons, those who handle the promotions. And when we even seen for Black men to be able to start their own businesses and again go the entrepreneurial route, there's still a lack of access to federal, state, and local contracts. So y'all, like, it's not as simple and easy as some of us may want it to think that it is, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. Our ancestors came over here doing the impossible every single day, and I have no doubt that we will be able to continue to do the same thing.
In this report, there's also some good news. There's some good news that's buried in here too. Black male HBCU enrollment, it actually ticked up between 2020 and 2022. And you also in the report highlight Alabama A&M's their record enrollment, 42% of Black men in their incoming class, and Morgan State's presidential task force. Talk to us about what made some of these approaches to the work sort of bear more fruit than other approaches.
Well, one thing we saw with Morgan State University, shout out to President Frederick, a very good guy. But one thing we saw with their institution was their ability to be able to retain their Black male students after they got to school. It's one thing for the males to come in, for the young men to come into school, but you got to do a very good job and understand that there are different dynamics at play for Black males to retain them and keep them at the institution. So peer mentoring programs, being intentional with assigning every young man with the mentor, very conscious and strategic ways of following up with the young men when they go off to school, trying to find different ways to keep them at the university and not just allowing them to go home, in which they may sometimes have to deal with different barriers that be presented with different barriers that may prevent them from coming back to school. In some instances, it's better just keep them there. We saw with the city of Baltimore doing a phenomenal job of developing an access to workforce development program, as well as job placement after the workforce development program. So again, there are instances in which people are doing the work and it is working. However, we need more, and we need this report to, again, not necessarily represent something that's bleak and gloom and doomy, but we have to understand what's in front of us and then develop a plan and strategy for us to move forward.
Just as you were saying that, the song "Greatest Love of All" by Whitney Houston popped in my head. And as you know, one of the lyrics from that song is "Teach them well and let them lead the way."
Yep.
And I want to go back to sort of where we started in this conversation, which is the importance of focusing in on Black third and fourth graders.
Yes.
Only 17% of Black fourth graders are reading at an NAEP proficient level. And,
Right.
that's a statistic that it predates college. It
Right.
predates the job market. It's happening in elementary school. Talk to us about how much of everything else in this report really traces back to the third and fourth grade reading. And for all of our union leaders that are tapped in and listening, what more can union leadership do to help us better reach Black third and fourth graders, knowing how high the stakes are?
Well, a couple of things. So I've served as a high school teacher. I've been an assistant principal and a dean at an alternative school, chair of a political science department, and obviously a vice mayor in the city of Charlottesville. And I've served on the State Board of Education here in Virginia. So when we look at like being in the trenches in that regard, we've seen good ways to do things and then not so good ways to do things. When schools and high poverty, maybe some would say high poverty, underperforming schools based off of data, do not have reading interventionists. And when they don't have reading specialists from kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade, at least 2 of them per grade, we see the impact in grade 7, 8, 9, 10. When young men specifically do not have an enthusiasm and or love for reading or the basic competency skill to be able to do phonetics or handle what they are reading without being frustrated or feeling as if they just want to give up and then go get on the game or get on the phone or something else. The byproduct is what we see in these statistics in terms of low unemployment rate, 6.6% for the month of June, 7.3% in the month of April. The connections are evident. If you can't read, you can't understand how to get your money or how to count your money. If you don't have any money, you might check out. If you have a kid and you don't have any money, you in bad shape. If you want to date a woman and you don't have any money, you in bad shape. Society has told us often that you need money in order to be able to move forward. Well, if you cannot read, which is one of the most basic fundamental skills that we all have to obtain, how much harder is it going to be for you to be gainfully employed? So again, when we look at what schools and institutions have to do as a whole very early on, regardless of whether or not an institution, and I'm talking about a K-12 or early elementary school, receives Title I funding from the federal government to be able to have additional teachers. But without reading interventionists and professionals, we see these horrific numbers just continue to dwindle in the wrong direction, not in the right direction. So again, those are solutions and priorities that we have to make, but we have to be able to show up and be present at our local school board meetings, at our State Board of Education meetings, and even speaking to our members of Congress about how we address these items. We need, again, targeted and specific interventions and solutions for Black men and boys that are not just going to be catch-all, be-all for everybody. We have a certain set of issues that we have to deal with, and we need everyone's help.
That's absolutely right. And, you're taking me back to, my days as a staffer to a Los Angeles school board member. And one of the most valuable lessons I learned from David Tukovsky was that the home is the first line of defense. Of course, the school districts can do a lot and teachers can do a lot. And, there are a lot of folks that can step in to fill the gap. But really, the home is the first line of defense. And so it's very easy to point the finger at, what's not happening in the schools or what's not happening in Washington or what money is not where. And those are serious issues that we need to be watchful of and vigilant and productive in helping to change. But that does not negate the power that it belongs to, folks in the home and folks on the front lines. And so, Dr. Bellamy, in our remaining minutes with you, I want to just, highlight the fact that your 6 priorities in this report, they range from strong evidence to policy proposal. And I really appreciate your refreshing honesty that not everything in this report is proven. And so, is there any one priority that you think could move the needle fastest if just one city, one state, one school district committed to it fully?
I would say the the priority in terms of where we specifically identify access to workforce development, where we center it around access to workforce development, I think that has the ability to be able to change the trajectory of young men and boys, well, not necessarily boys, or families for that matter, but young men's lives at an expedited rate. So what I mean by that, here in Charlottesville, we have something called the Pathway to Pipelines Workforce Development Plan, in which we bring in roughly 20 to 25 young men. Many of them are African Americans, and we put them through a 6-week training program, and we partner it with a program that will in fact hire them, or a job or employer rather that will in fact hire them. We pay them to attend the training. So they make a livable wage, which is $21. They get paid during those 6 weeks as long as they show up every single day. They receive a stipend at the end, and then there is a promise of employment at the duration of the skilled trades program. Now, the city also has stated that what we will do is we'll pay half of the salary for that employment, for that employee rather, for the first 6 months. So we tell that the employer, you don't have to put all the skin in the game. We're willing to put some in the game as well. And this is our commitment to help fast track some of these young men to have a better usage, or better usage one of their time, but a more access to get out of the quote unquote proverbial rat race. Let's help get some money so that then once you're able to have a livable wage, you're able to get your own home, maybe your own place, because unfortunately, a lot of our brothers are homeless. Yeah, brother, I'm gonna tell you, like, if you sleeping from chick to chick, and you sleeping with this one and that one, and that's where you lay your head, you got some of your shoes here and you got some of your shoes there. Hey, bro, and you going to your mama house, you homeless. If you at your homeboy's couch here and there and you trying to figure it out, you're homeless. And unfortunately, while it may not look like a young man being at a shelter or sleeping under a bridge, many of our brothers are in fact homeless. And again, if we can get them the access to resources with gainful employment, I really believe that will expedite some of the other and alleviate some of the other issues. Because then we'll also allow them to be able to get access to resources, which will again help them take care of their families and so forth. So that would be the main one.
We're going to have to leave it there. My thanks to Dr. Bellamy. Thank you for the clarity and the urgency. Where can our listeners find the full brief?
So the report can be found at Virginia State University, JMLI. You can just literally type in VSU JMLI, and the report will come right on up. We have our own landing page. So I hope you take it, digest it, and then go do something about it.
We'll have you back to continue the conversation soon. You're listening to and streaming a More Purple Union on KBLA Talk 1580. Thank you, Dr. Bellamy.
Thank you, my brother.